Welcome to the IVF Journey with Dr. Michael Chapman, the podcast for couples who struggle with infertility and want to fulfill their dreams of becoming parents. In this podcast, you'll learn actionable strategies to deal with infertility from Dr. Michael Chapman, or Prof as he's affectionately known. Prof is the co-founder of IVF Australia and is a leading Australian infertility specialist who has helped over 3,000 couples realise their dreams of becoming parents. To access previous episodes packed with ideas, solutions and tips that actually work, head over to Dr. Chapman's IVF podcast on iTunes. You can also ask questions by contacting Dr. Chapman's rooms on 1800 111 483 or by emailing him michael.chapman@ivf.com.au.
That first cry of a baby born after the long journey of IVF remains one of the most beautiful experiences in the world. As an obstetrician and an IVF specialist, I've had the privilege of experiencing this over many thousands of times in my long career, but I still remain moved by each baby's first cry. It signifies the end of a long journey and the beginning of a new life. This is Professor Michael Chapman, co-founder of IVF Australia and host of the IVF Journey podcast. Thanks for tuning in. To access all the previous episodes, head over to my website, www.theivfjourney.com, and select IVF Journey Podcast from the navigation menu. You'll also be able to find the various services that we provide at IVF Australia. So we read in the newspapers about women in their 50s and even a 70-year-old having a baby through IVF. We always end up with a front page story, a significant controversy about interfering with nature, and about the ethics and morality of old women having children. I suppose the most devastating story I've read in the last 2 or 3 years was of the Italian psychiatrist. She was in her early 60s and had a donor egg, carried a pregnancy, had a beautiful baby, and within 18 months she'd had a heart attack and died. So women having babies in old age is not a very clever thing. That said, I personally don't hold it against anybody to use the technology that we have if they have thought through the process, thought through the issues like, what if I die? What are the supports for that child? There's a case in Melbourne reported about 18 months ago where a 71-year-old woman went to India and had eggs from a donor, create a pregnancy, and she had a baby. The pregnancy itself apparently went uneventfully, although she ended up with a caesarean section, not surprisingly. Her husband was significantly older, but it appears that she has had support from her daughters who were in their 40s, and they had worked out what would happen to that child in the longer term if the parents weren't around or were unable to look after her. So they'd gone through the process, they'd thought it through, and I don't criticise them for what they desperately wanted. The technology was there, and they took advantage of it. And that child, I'm sure, will have a great life that it would never have had otherwise. Although it may have to deal with the issues around older parents, there is infrastructure around to look after that child. In terms of women in their 50s, which is perhaps a little more acceptable, it is possible, and even in nature there are the occasional pregnancies with natural conception in women in their 50s. They're few and far between, however. But using donor eggs, these women can be pregnant. There's no question of that. And the majority of the newspaper stories that you see of film stars and rock stars having babies in their late 40s and early 50s, 99.9% of them are with eggs from girls who are only 25 or so. So If you are in that age group, don't hold out hope that you're going to have a baby by your own eggs. It would be a miracle. Just because the quality of eggs in women of that age is so poor, the genetic abnormalities are so great, that it's virtually impossible to use your own eggs. Then we have to think about the health of the mother. Is it a good idea for a 50-year-old to be carrying a baby? She has increased risks of heart disease. She has increased risks of diabetes. And physically, obviously, from a muscles and joints perspective, she's not going to cope like a 30-year-old would. So medically, pregnancy in an older woman is significantly more risky. The incidence of stillbirth and premature labour are significantly increased. The risk of preeclampsia, high blood pressure in pregnancy, is significantly increased. So any woman over 45, certainly in my clinic, would be consulting an obstetric physician to get the all clear before I would embark on doing IVF with. To not do so, I think, is negligent. But it is possible. The procedure of egg donation is the same as in a younger woman. The trick is to be able to find a donor. In Australia, that's almost impossible unless you have family or friends who are prepared to donate the eggs. However, overseas there are egg banks. Some of those are now bringing eggs into Australia. But the quality of those programs is still really to be assessed. There are good donor programs internationally in Spain and in the United States, even in South Africa, that I would be recommending as the places to go if you wanted to go down the donor egg route. So, older women having babies is physiologically possible, provided the hormonal support is given. A uterus doesn't seem to age, provided it's stimulated by estrogen and progesterone. Women having donor eggs at 50 have the same chances of success as a woman at 30. So it's still quite possible for these patients to have a pregnancy, carry a pregnancy, and be able to have that baby that they may have been trying for so long. Don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website www.theivfjourney.com and select IVF Journey Podcast from the navigation menu.
Thank you for listening to the IVF Journey with Dr. Michael Chapman, the podcast which helps couples negotiate their way through the IVF journey, all the way to parenthood. You can also ask questions by contacting Dr. Chapman's rooms on 1-800-111-483 or by emailing him michael.chapman@ivf.com.au.